you, Jonathan, Timo, and Rami. Our next panel is on FinTech new trends and innovation. This panel hosts leaders in financial services and FinTech to discuss the trends that are reshaping the sector and the strategies that banks and governments should pursue to keep up with the disruption and capture emerging opportunities. Please help me welcome the moderator of this session, Reine Farhat, the senior editor at wamda.com.
I'm Reine Farhat. Before I start with a quick overview on the FinTech industry, I would like to welcome our panelists, Walid, Hanna, and Timo and Massimo. So Walid Hanna is the founder and the managing partner of MEVP. Timo Dreger, investment manager at Coparion VC. And Massimo Campello, business partner at Supernovae Labs. I hope I spelled it correctly. So FinTech is definitely a promising industry. WAMDA's recent State of FinTech report said that MENA FinTech startups have raised over $100 million in investment. And this number is expected to increase by 2020. Also, we have around 105 MENA FinTech startups. And this number is also expected to increase to 205 by 2020, and we definitely look forward to that. So, long story short, the industry is promising. However, the way FinTech businesses operate right now, they always need an intermediate entity for them to operate completely. So, my question to each one of you is this the only way for them to move forward and make money? What's going to happen next? Who would like to start?
No, I'd like to hear how you do it in Europe. Fintechs, do they need the banks?
Well, I think that is a very, I would say, the key question actually, because everything that will happen in the coming few years is exactly based on how this model will work. So FinTech plus the banks. Just to give you a couple of additional numbers to what just you mentioned. We estimate that worldwide we have more or less around 27,000 fintechs at the moment. Only in Italy we have just 150 and about 7,000 in Europe. So the real issue is how to make this huge network of potential opportunities for the banks work exactly with the banks and make basically a win-win case where both banks and fintechs can earn money. I would say that if we look at what is happening overall, I mean, bank cannot do anything but collaborate. Even though at the beginning, the last few years, there were some situations where banks were looking at the fintechs as a potential competitor, but now we are on the other side where basically banks are directly investing in fintechs. So I think the collaboration should be both in terms of putting together financial resources and capabilities, but also in terms of reinventing and redesigning the business model. So the business model on which every single bank provides services to their clientele, to the customer base, in a way to have basically the human service and the human capability that is backed up by all the potential from the fintechs in terms, for instance, of artificial intelligence, in terms of capacity to handle a huge amount of data, in order to empower and to strengthen the capability of the, let's say, human network within the bank. That is the only way that the bank can really cope with this challenge, because otherwise they will be out of the game. So that is a very important point.
Yeah, thank you. I work for a bank in Dubai and London, and for a fintech startup, and my view on this is collaboration is, for me, more or less the success factor for fintechs, because the banks are the owner of the relations. It's very, very expensive for startups, fintechs, to get customers. And when you ask here, who's happy with their bank? Nobody would say, yeah, I'm super happy with the bank. But when you ask again, who changed the bank? Nobody changed. The banks are in a position that that are the owner of the relationships. And for fintech, it's very hard to get these relations. But the good thing about the fintechs is that they can move fast and they can really add value to the customers. And that's why we see probably more and more corporations in terms of user experience and and that both sides can benefit from each other. I'm very positive on collaborations between both sides.
Same question for me?
So basically my initial question was that the way now fintech startups operate is that they always need to collaborate with an entity. So will it be the only way for them to move forward?
I mean, there are some fintechs who made it by owning their own customer base, right? It's not just purely going through banks. Locally, I mean, it's more or less illegal, I would say, to be able to market any fintech product without going through the banks. That's here, locally in Lebanon. And going through a bank is very complicated. We tried it. We tried it in 2 companies. We have 3 or 4 fintech plays as part of our portfolio. A couple of them are regional, a couple of them are Lebanese. And the resistance we've seen from Lebanese banks was quite important. Unfortunately, as a fintech company, you cannot just go and ask the consumer to open an account. He has to link a credit card, he has to link his bank account, and it has to go through a bank, period. Going internationally and trying to market a product by using Visa or MasterCard internationally might be blocked by the central bank or the banking commission. So that's not very clear how we can do this without going through the banks. The resistance we've seen, I mean, we have a billing payment aggregation business. I remember going to one of those big banks, and the reaction was, we offered 600 billers out of a mobile platform, okay? And we told them it's an electronic bills presentment and payment, EBPP. And the reaction of one of the banks was, hey, we allow those customers to pay their utility bills. So these are 3 bills, but we offer 600. I said, yes, but if you offer those 3 bills, I'm going to lose market share on those 3 bills. And we try to explain to them that there's no benefit into delaying this process. Everybody's going to pay their bills electronically one day or another. Why do you want to just snatch another 2 or 3 years instead of adopting it and growing the market quicker and getting a better market share and a bigger fee of the pie? So it's still facing serious resistance from Lebanese banks.
Yeah. Speaking of the portfolio companies you invested in, PinPay, HyperPay, Treasury Express.
Yeah.
So what I would like to know is what were the data and metrics that you relied on to make that decision?
To invest?
In these fintech startups in specific.
All right. Each of them were very different as a stage from one to another. When we invested in PinPay, this was like 5 years ago, 6 years ago maybe, there was nothing. It was just a business plan. There was no product, so there was no data to look at. Treasury Express, it was a different play. It's a treasury solution. It uses SWIFT. It allows people to consolidate bank. Usually, the end customer is a company that has 20 plus bank accounts. So it uses SWIFT and consolidates the bank account, and it offers payment solution also using SWIFT. And their customers is the likes of ADP in the US. They have European customers, and we brought them to the GCC. Now, the data at that point was the revenue line, because it was a Series A, so they had like 10 customers. We managed to bring them back from Paris to Lebanon to set up. We invested using 331 money. We grow the business in GCC by bringing 10 or 12 customers to the company. Again, we assessed the technology and not the data at that point in time because it was not that relevant. HyperPay is a payment gateway that's based in, initially in Jordan, now it's based in Saudi Arabia. The data point there was the revenue line. It's a payment gateway, so they just offer payment solutions to e-commerce businesses. They hook up with banks, and at that time they had 1 or 2 banks. When we came in, today they have 10 banks in Saudi. So most of their business is Saudi-based now.
Okay. Timo, we were chatting a bit outside about the fintech industry, and you were telling me, how it's different. You traveled a lot in the region, so it would be nice, since you have a fresh eye on what's happening here, being based in Germany, if you can tell us a little bit what some of the common and different things that you see.
Yeah, the one common thing is that everywhere in the world we travel to is you see people with ideas. It's here's the same. I was at the convention area and I was impressed that you see young people, younger than me, I'm 33, to come up with ideas. But the difference I see in regions is that that the environment is different in every region. In Germany, we have a very positive entrepreneurship environment. On the US. Here, I'm not sure how the environment really is to set up a company, to go to market. Maybe Lebanon's better, but it's definitely not the same standard here than in the whole region. And for me, it's I'm a little bit sad to see that talent from regions, especially when they went to university in Europe or in the US, that they're not coming back. That they say, okay, I have a great idea, but the opportunity in countries like the US or Europe is much higher. And I want to do it there. I think the big challenge is to set up an environment that people from regions come back and say, I want to solve problems here. I want to do something better here in this region. And because when you have a great idea, it's of course the opportunity is better to go to the US. Also for entrepreneurs from Germany, if you have the chance to go to Silicon Valley, why not? But I think for all of us, it's a really challenge to set up an environment that it's these people coming back and say, okay, I want to solve a problem here in Beirut. I want to solve a problem here in this region. And therefore, you guys and all of us, we have to set up a very good entrepreneur-friendly environment. That's the key point, my point of view, is talent.
Massimo, do you have anything to say about this? Because you're also, you told me you're now focused on Kuwait, but you also come from Europe,
yes.
Italy.
Well, actually, Timo, I think, has taken the perspective of the fintechs. Let me just move a little bit in perspective of the banks, how the banks are, working with the fintechs in Europe, and what I've seen so far in the GCCs. Actually, I'm based in Kuwait, but I also, have an interest in, of course, Emirates in particular, and then Bahrain also. Well, if you look at what happened in Italy we can, for instance, cluster the banks in 2 groups. One, the traditional ones, the big ones, that they approach the innovation and the fintech world on a step-by-step cases, just trying to, go opportunistically on some specific functionalities and solutions that could be useful to improve their offering. While there's a group of the innovators, really completely new banks that have been established from scratch, and therefore they, like Kebanka or Widiba, and therefore in their business models they have already incorporated the idea of working with fintechs, which of course is completely different perspective. Okay, if we move to Europe, and Timo is very very active on that, but we can just mention 2 cases, for instance. It could be good, benchmarks and highlight some concepts. One clearly is a BBVA that is very well known at this point, but again, it's still worth it to say that BBVA shows how a clear view and clear vision from the top management can really help the bank to transform significantly from a traditional, business into a total digitized company. When Gonzalez said that BBVA will be a software company in a few years, that is a very important statement, because it gives you a completely different perspective. Or on a larger scale, if you consider, for instance, Danske Bank in Denmark, they started with mobile pay, that was initially a sort of almost a laboratory, almost let's say a limited attempt, and now they are, market leader. All Danish banks are partnering with them in sharing this solution. When I moved from Europe to GCCs, the impression that I have is that the banks in this part of the world are still a little bit, are very much interested, of course, in innovation, but still cautious in how to move about it. So, for instance, they are looking at some solutions like, the account opening, digitized account opening, that can be quite an important, let's say, message to the market, to the stakeholders, in saying that they are moving towards a new era. But still, I think it's important to work closer in really redesign the key concepts and the basic, model behind the bank. So in terms of innovation, I don't know so far how much there's a will to do that, because, still a situation is very much like, going by incremental steps into the innovation. That is my view.
Yeah, we'll discuss a bit later about the adoption rate, because I believe you have a lab that aims to facilitate the fintech adoption. Okay, so I'm going to move on to blockchain a little bit.
Can I just ask a question? Did Lebanon adopt a digital signature law? Not yet. So really very, very far behind. Go ahead.
So if, since we talk about Lebanon, we can talk a little bit about, what should we do in terms of legislations, in terms to really facilitate the adoption of fintech solutions and the launch of fintech startups. Like, I wanted to wrap up the discussion with this, to have like some action items, but since you brought it up now.
Can anyone
like a wish list, maybe.
A wish list. Can anyone convince His Excellency Governor Salemi to allow cryptocurrencies? That's a wish list.
Yeah.
I mean, market share of cryptocurrencies today is somewhere around, I don't know, $600 billion? $500 billion? Okay, that's the right number. I mean, Bitcoin is at what, 190 recently? 39% Yeah, all right. Everything else is sharing the rest, but these are really big numbers, and we're not even getting close to our first ICO. Not in Lebanon, not in the region, by the way. Maybe a bit in Dubai. Sorry.
In one of the previous conferences I attended, he spoke about launching, like BDL launching their own digital
yeah,
currency.
I read about this. I don't know how serious this is.
Yeah.
Challo.
So my question was about blockchain, which a lot of people think is just an evolution of an existing technology that's going to improve our lives. And I really want to talk about the impact of blockchain really on fintech.
I'm pretty sure Massimo and Timo have much more experience in this.
Well, I think, yes, blockchain in terms of technology can be quite an important enabler to move on innovation. Talking about the technology per se, meaning all the solutions that can help, for instance, in working on certain specific processes, like, for instance, document management. That could be an important part, or clearly all the processes related to the cross-border payments, which of course is probably the hottest application at the moment. It's very important what Ripple has just achieved a few days ago with the Saudi Monetary Authority. It's an important signal that goes basically on the line of the same that Ripple did last year with the Bank of England, because they made a very important POC, which shows that this technology can be really something that can improve the performance of the entire system. So as far as the technology is concerned, I think in Europe we are quite open to exploit at maximum the potential. As far as the cryptocurrencies are concerned, as you know, Mr. Draghi, like a month and a half ago, made a very precise statement saying that Bitcoin can be a huge bubble, a huge problem with, the savings with, families and so on. So clearly the European bank has a very conservative attitude on that, but that does not prevent the entire banking system to move forward in the blockchain technology.
Yeah, my point of view, you have to separate two different things. First thing is blockchain, let's say for enterprise or governments, and blockchain in terms of cryptocurrencies and ICOs.
Yeah.
The ICO and crypto thing, it's, I don't know, I'm not the expert, and I have an opinion on that, but it's a different, in my point of view, different discussion. The blockchain thing for this region is, in my point of view, a huge opportunity to set up what you said, the e-government thing. It's you have a totally different system than instead of for like Europe or in the US. For us, it's very difficult to adopt blockchain, especially for the government. But for enterprises, I'm pretty positive in terms of payments, smart contracts, that we see a lot of business models in the next couple of months or years for banks and insurances, because yeah, everything is there. You have to establish the technology, and when you talk about innovation and startups, here the industry has a chance to make an industry standard. Banks can say that's the industry standard, where fintechs have to add on. It's the opposite around. The corporates can use blockchain and say that's what we do. We see this in this insurance space, that all the big insurers and reinsurers in Europe, they work together on one big solution. And I think that's a great opportunity also for this region too, to set up blockchain for maybe for the whole for everything here.
Do you want to add anything before we move to the next question?
From purely pipeline perspective, because that's what we do, we invest in startups. In this part of the world, we have seen very little blockchain technology-based startups, very few. We invested in one in Dubai, a loyalty solution. Dubai government has been very active. They're unifying their land registry on the blockchain.
The property, yeah.
The properties, exactly, the whole property market. And DIFC, they have their own accelerator. They announced a $100 million fintech fund. And one of their main focus is on blockchain technologies and cryptocurrencies as well. Now, no central bank has allowed it. There is one exchange in Dubai. It's called Bit Oasis. I think, so that's at least one exchange in the Arab world that is performing extremely well, I heard, in terms of volume. The growth is simply phenomenal. I wish we were invested in it. We're not. That's about it, really. I mean, other than Ripple and the Saudi Arabia SAMA authority, that's it in the Arab world. Nobody really touched on this whole blockchain phenomenon.
When it comes to the applications of fintech, which sectors do you see fintech creating more value and impact? In which sectors, mainly?
Can I start?
Go ahead,
okay.
Please.
Well, in banking, I think if you look at the retail and private, there's one area that is very now interesting in Europe, as far as we see as a Supernovae, which is the coupling of artificial intelligence with investment, with the asset management, portfolio management for the customers, both retail and private. Then there's also a very important area in the management of loyalty programs, because again, with the big data and the capability to manage a huge amount of information, the banks can really tailor the campaigns in a very precise way. That has started a lot in the card business, but is moving also to other traditional products like deposit savings and so on. Another area which is very promising is all the PFM segments, so the personal financial management, and we coupled with a CRM, which is an evolved version of CRM. Another area that we are working quite a bit significantly now, not only in Italy but also in a couple of other countries, is the development of bank marketplaces. So basically the banks have the favor that they, among their customers, they have both consumers and suppliers, consumers and retailers or small businesses. So they are in a very nice position to put themselves in the middle and make the exchanges and of course profit from all the trades and all transactions that can occur between the two counterparts. Clearly that is something that must be of course compliant with the regulations and so on, because sometimes, for instance, in certain countries in the GCCs you need to be very clear in setting the Chinese walls between what the bank does and what this marketplace is doing. But this is a promising area. Another one is on the small businesses, because lending to the small businesses is going to be probably the breakthrough for 2018 and 19. In Italy, we have some interesting fintechs to provide financing for the invoicing cycle. So basically, the small businesses go to the bank and can have a credit on the invoices in a matter of like half an hour, while the traditional process with either leading European banks can take like 3, 4, 5 weeks. Okay, that is really booming.
But why do you need a bank in this case? If it's on the blockchain, peer-to-peer lending,
exactly.
you don't need the bank anymore.
Yeah, it could be, but at least, for instance, in Italy, there's a fintech called Credimi, which is basically a kind of peer-to-peer from this perspective. But according to the Italian regulations, Credimi had to have the license to provide the credit to the final users, meaning the small businesses. So even though it's not a bank at all, it's a platform, but has to get the authorization to provide credit. So again, this is a very important point, because if a traditional bank does not react properly to this kind of alternatives, clearly they can be disintermediate very quickly on a segment that so far has been highly profitable for the leading banks in the continent. Another application, the insurance, for instance, is the IoT for the health program, personal health programs. So you can couple the IoT with the artificial intelligence, the machine learning, to adapt the products, the coverage products to the final users, and move from, say, a reactive mode, which typically is the insurance business, or the insurance acts whenever there's a claim, to a proactive and predictive kind of business model, where basically the insurance can adapt almost in real time in terms of providing the perfect service to the customer.
Yeah, for me, it's I lived in, like I said, I lived in Dubai, I lived in London, I'm back in Germany. For me, I'm coming from the customer perspective. It's to open up a bank account easily. That's for me a field this whole region has to work on. It's really a nightmare in Dubai. It was really, really a nightmare to set up a bank account, a lot of documents. It cost me, I don't know, 1 or 2 days. The same in the UK. It's, for me, it's from a customer perspective, it's, hopefully we see startups or banks in cooperation with startups to make this whole process easier. In Germany, we have a startup called Number 26. You can open up a bank account, a full bank account on the mobile phone via video chat. That's a really, really good solution for customers, and hopefully, especially when the government and the banks, when they can bring it down, that you can open up a bank account. If there's a business model out there here in this region, this whole everything, when it's there, it will influence everything, SME lending, all this whole legislative procedure. And I think you guys have to start to thinking about customer first and then B2B business models, lending and other stuff. But open a bank account, I don't know, let's say in 1 day or in 10 minutes or 1 hour, that would be a massive impact for the whole region.
Do you see any, what about you? Do you see any applications where fintech can really provide value other than what was mentioned?
Definitely in international remittances, right?
Yes.
The supply financing, also mentioned, absolutely. I believe Italy and Europe has 2-3 years advance on our region with regards to the applications of how blockchain can be used for financial services. So that's been mentioned. Anything we missed on an application?
I don't think so. Account opening is typically something that, for instance, banks also in Kuwait now they are quite active on, because it's a very distinctive, message to the market. So
I've read about RegTech company using blockchain for KYC management.
Yeah, maybe one fee we missed is foreign exchange thing. A lot of people, for example, in Dubai, they send money home, and it's really, they pay a lot of interest when they send money, maybe to India or to other places. That's a field I looked a couple of years ago to look at this, but it's, at my point of view, there's no real good solutions.
Let me tell you about something I invested in personally. It's a very small amount of money. Have you heard of Telcoin? TEL coin? Anyone?
No.
They created this currency for telecom operators to transfer money using telcos. The claim is that there are 10 times more telco accounts than bank accounts, especially in emerging markets. And they're empowering those telecom operators to use this currency, the Telcoin, that's built on Ethereum, to transfer money. And a very secure, and you don't need to trust the guy in front of you. You know that the blockchain is going to protect you.
Yeah.
This could work a lot in countries like Egypt, where there's a lot of unbanked people there.
Unbanked people, yeah.
This can bring the international transfer fees for banks down to a lot.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So I'm not advertising Telcoin, but maybe you should look at it.
Any telcos in the house? So what new fintech trends that have emerged this year and that weren't on your radar the year before? Cool stuff.
I missed a little bit the whole crypto thing. I saw it coming, but this massive impact for me I was shocked in a bit that, it's there since a couple of years, and this year this whole blockchain, Bitcoin thing, it's crazy. I was a bit surprised that it's right now it's so big impact, the ICO thing. Yesterday we had the BaFin, the German regulator, said, okay, they will look at it, but I was shocked how fast these startups did ICOs and how massively the price of Bitcoin went up and down. It surprised me.
Well, I think probably the huge growth that already in 2017 was performed by the solutions for SME lending. Actually, if I remember correctly, I think about 18-20% of all the VCs, or all the capital has been invested in new fintechs in 2017 in US and Europe, was addressing exactly these applications. So I think there was a move from the traditional payment kind of solutions. Now payments, I would say, can be considered sort of mature market for the fintechs, because it's been the first application that was developed towards more specialized solutions like this one, for instance.
I have one data point that might be interesting for the audience. Last year, 2017, there was $3.7 billion raised in ICOs last year, and they expect this number to multiply this year. It's last year it was about 2% of the whole IPO market that was raised in ICOs, and the market share is going to probably multiply by 5 this year or more, maybe. It's amazing what we're going to miss out on just by forbidding digital currencies.
Yeah, so yeah, we can open it to questions, sure.
Any opinion on that?
Well, actually, yes, the wallets are now very, very well developed. First of all, in Europe, as we know, but in the GCC are picking up as well. I think the more important thing is exactly also some, the agreements that were defined with the mobile operators. So that is an important link as what you were saying. So I think that is an area that can go still further in the coming months or years.
We have a question in the back.
All right. So in Europe, there's this open banking API regulation that they've implemented, and where fintech startups can actually access your bank account information, exchange sort of data.
Yeah.
But in the case of Lebanon, where we have banking secrecy laws that can stop that thing, do you see any possibility of overcoming that, or perhaps establishing some sort of protocol between that sort of fintech banks and the user, the client in this case? So if anyone can answer this, that'd be great.
My question is to the bankers. Would the banks allow the customer to opt in and open up his own records? If this works, maybe this would answer your question, right? Would the banks authorize it, or would BDL authorize an opt-in for somebody to lose the bank secrecy? I can waive it. For the Centrale de Risque, I can waive it, right? But other than that.
You could waive it. Each individual could waive its right on banking.
Okay, so that's legal.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Signs.
Would this work? Right.
But I think that this is a very good example of what banks in the Middle East can do to move faster towards the innovation. Because at this point, the central bank should, I think, push towards two things. One is competition, and the other one is transparency. So, and BSD2 is exactly doing that. So, opening the app is opening really the banks, and HSBC or Crédit Agricole are exactly moving towards that heavily, because they understand that it's the only way that they can really have a better relationship with the clients at the end of the day. That should be done also probably by central banks in the region, which of course is probably from a cultural perspective still there are some obstacles, but I don't believe that can be delayed too long.
Yeah, you had a question?
Yes, talking about the PSD2 and the open banking, sorry. Did you start seeing any concrete, tangible results? I mean, I know it's too soon, it started it's in force since Jan.
Yes.
But any trends, any new things going on in the fintech since that?
There's a massive impact that a lot of startups in Germany and Europe focus on this open API, that you can analyze your whole data independently, or that you can switch from one day to another the bank account with all things. There are a lot of, from my point of view, we will see a lot of new business models around that. But the first thing is analyzing and account switching. That's the obvious things what I see last couple of weeks.
Yeah, the directive is being empowered now, because 2018 will be really the first trial year.
Yeah.
And I think another point would be really to facilitate the exchange of information and therefore the transactions between the different segments of this clientele within the bank. I think that first of all the banks will try to use this directive internally to facilitate their internal processes and therefore also achieving some better service for one hand and also to reduce some operating costs. So in the end that could be an important impact in terms of concrete actual results.
All right. I guess our time is up. Okay.
There's another question.
Do we have room for one more
last
question?
one?
Okay.
Just on the same topic, what do you see as banks creating new business models using PSD2 by collaborating with fintechs? What's your perspective on that?
For example, bank insurance is a big thing that the Deutsche Bank announced a partnership with a startup called Friendsurance that you can buy insurance products out of your bank account. In my point of view, that's also, maybe we see, I think you guys are familiar with bank insurance, maybe we see a second wave of bank insurances that banks and insurance startups or insurances collaborate again and find new business models based on PSD2.
I think just going on the same lines, there's a fintech that has been established in Germany, if I'm correct, which is Deposit Solutions.
Yeah.
That is a very extremely interesting model because basically allows the banks to expand its customer base without having a physical infrastructure at all, also in other countries. So just exchanging, data information on the specific clients, and this can be quite, a revolution because that breaks basically all the walls between the different, among the different banks. So it's an extremely important tool to increase competition. So.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reine, and the panelists. I would like to remind you all to download the app, ArabNet Beirut, to check what other topics are being held. And now we are going for a break. Please be back by 2:30. Enjoy.